Hello, BookTube. You know, if SteveCon 2018 really does happen, and a whole bunch of you get on planes and trains and automobiles to come and see me here in Boston, one of the things we will certainly do is go to the Brattle Bookshop in downtown Boston. I mentioned it on this channel ad nauseum. it's a used bookstore that is really busy, really active, and really good. It's got 3 floors on the inside. First 2 floors are general interest used books, all reasonably priced. And then the 3rd floor is rare and collectible books. You can go up there and get a special gift for some bibliophile or other. And outside the shop, next door, there's an entire lot where a building would ordinarily go that has wheeled sale cards. $1, $3, and $5 sale cards. And the walls of the lot are also full of books as well. And I confess, the sale lot is where I spend most of my time when I go to the Brattle. I have credit at the Brattle almost all the time, and almost always in large enough numbers, so I could, buy anything I want there. But something about the sale cards, the random chance of it, and the constant change of it, just thrills me in a way that simply going to the L or the M section of a section in the bookstore itself kind of doesn't, even though those sections change all the time. And today I went to the Brattle with one of my credit slips was down to $6. And it doesn't make any difference at all. I actually make a living and I could easily get more credit at the Brattle, but instead I treated that $6 credit as if it were all that I had for my book buying budget for the day. And I wanted to see, before I got there, what can you get at the Brattle bargain cards for $6? And I wanted to show you. I got 6 books, of course. I didn't stray from the dollar cards. And I wanted to show you what I got to give you an idea of the treasures that you're all going to encounter when we all go to the Brattle together. The first one is a work of English history that is the editor and the introducer characterize it as virtually unknown, drastically overlooked, and they're entirely right. It's William Camden. The title of it is The History of the Most Renowned and Victorious Princess Elizabeth, late Queen of England. William Camden was a historian and an antiquarian who was born during the reign of Elizabeth's half-brother Edward, the brief reign of King Edward. And he collected documents and wrote a history of her reign. It's not particularly good reading. Camden wrote he wrote right on the turning point between the analytic way that writers in previous generations of English writers would do, where it's 1641, here are the things that happened in 1641. It's 1642, here are the things that happened in 1642. With the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle being the great ghost that hovers over it all as the way to do it. And when Camden was writing, was right around the time when people were starting to make narratives out of history and actually tell a story rather than just annals. And so his Queen Elizabeth book is sort of an unsuccessful hybrid of both of those, which probably explains why it's so neglected, because it's not an enjoyable thing to read. It's a treasure trove, though, of information. Oh my God. And I don't think that it's even been fully plumbed for all that it contains, even now, after centuries of study. And I had no idea that there was a well-edited, nicely designed hardcover at all. As far as I know, my beloved Penguin Classics, I don't think they've ever touched it. Now I'm starting to wonder why, because they've reprinted stuff like the Domesday Book or the Magna Carta that are also, not literary works. But I found it for $1, and it's got full critical apparatus, so it's going to be a joy to jump back into William Camden. I haven't read him or read about him in decades. And then the next thing is a made-up story. It's a novel by someone whose works have, the book's in rough shape. I will fix it. But the novelist has largely gone out of print. She's largely forgotten now. It's Rose Macaulay, and this is The World, My Wilderness is the novel in question here. And this thing's kind of beaten up, but I will fix it because she's worth having and she's worth reading. Those of you who know her name at all might know it from what's turned out to be her most reprinted book, which is The Towers of Trebizond. But all of her novels are fantastic. This whole back is great. The great book critics of the day singing her praises and thanking the stars above that she wrote this book, because this book appeared after a 10-year silence, when the whole of the literary world was pining for another Rose Macaulay book, and then she finally wrote one. This is the story of the coming of age of a young girl I think it was written in 1950, and the young girl is encountering a world of upheaval, and she has been raised in a largely bohemian way. And so in addition to encountering a world of upheaval, she's also encountering expectations of restriction on herself that she's never experienced before. A perfect vessel for Macaulay's insights into the world. Just perfect. I haven't read this book in ages. I don't even know the last time. I actually don't remember the last time I read a Rose Macaulay novel at all. She's almost entirely forgotten. Her list of novels, her great nonfiction, none of it is reprinted in Penguin Classics, as far as I know. I'd be willing to bet there's no Rose Macaulay that's currently in widespread reprint, and that's a terrible shame. She is a beautiful master of the English language. She belongs to that class of mid-century women writers that know what they're doing so much more thoroughly than most of their male counterparts, whether they're writing fiction like Muriel Spark or May Sarton or Rose Macaulay, or whether they're crafting translations. All the great Russian translations, almost all the great Italian translations of the middle of the 20th century were all done by these women who were scrupulously educated and excellent judges, excellent ear for the language. So it was a joy to find this for $1. I will repair it and then I will reread it, because it's just a treat. And then another treat, also $1. This is famous. It's 100 years old. It's A.C. Bradley's Shakespearean Tragedy. This is a poster art from a great old production of King Lear. Isn't that wonderful? I had no idea that this. I have never seen a hardcover edition of Bradley, and this thing has been reprinted 1 billion times since it appeared at the very beginning of the 20th century. It's his study of what, largely thanks to him, has become the canonical 4 Shakespearean tragedies: King Lear, Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello, and he studies them in a way that is easy to mock and is largely now considered antiquated. He studies them in a way of what if they were real? How many children had Lady Macbeth? Where exactly was young Hamlet when old Hamlet died? All that sort of thing. Those kinds of questions. He interrogates the text of the plays. And he does it with such incredible, clean sincerity that you'd have to be a pretty carping postmodern millennial to mock it. It's just so good. It's just so thought-provoking. I've mentioned on this channel before a couple of times, there's a shelf of Shakespeare books, maybe at this point a whole bookcase of Shakespeare books that you absolutely have to have, and this is one of them. And I had no idea that it existed in a hardcover. I don't even have a paperback, because all the paperbacks I have fallen apart, because I keep going back to it. If there's a new Norton Critical edition of Macbeth or a new annotated edition of King Lear, and I read it, and I'm reading all about it, and I'm reading the essays in it, invariably I'm going to want to go back and refresh my memory on what Bradley had to say about it. So I was glad to find it. And then the next two, it's coincidence. Coincidence largely rules the Brattle sale carts, but it's pointed coincidence if you've been watching my last few recent videos, and if you haven't, why haven't you? Books that I've been finding, used books that I've been finding, and also a couple of new books that I've been getting in the mail, have been tending me towards reading about Ronald Reagan's second term in office and the term as president of George H.W. Bush. The world at the turning point of the fall of communism, the end of the Soviet Union, the rise of a new invigorated authoritarianism in China, a radical sea change in American politics, little understood at the time, just all these things coming together. And the reason I say the second term of Ronald Reagan is because the more I read about it, the more I think that George H.W. Bush was more active and more involved in that second term than certainly than he was portrayed at the time. And I'm starting to read books, but what you saw, I read. I just recently got a book that George H.W. Bush wrote with Brent Scowcroft, who was one of the gray old men who presided over this whole period of American political history. And I found another book today that it's even bigger. It's gigantic, and I don't think I read it when it first came out. I think I dismissed it. It's George Schultz, who was Secretary of State for Ronald Reagan. Triumph and what's it called again? Turmoil and Triumph. Don't know why people give books titles like that, but it's his exhaustively detailed account of his years as Secretary of State, which were from 1982 to 1989. And I remember when this came out, everybody reviewed it. Commentary, Foreign Affairs, all of the magazines, all of the journals reviewed it. And they did what they always do with political memoirs like this. They tended to ignore the book in order to talk about the time. And that's okay, because I sort of want that. I still want that. But looking back, I'm trying to remember people writing about the book, what they actually said about the book. And I seem to remember that the few comments that were made about the worth of the book itself were stellar. They compared it to Dean Acheson, for God's sake, who's wrote one of the great Secretary of State biographies of all time. So I got this behemoth, and it was $1, and I don't think that I've read it, so I'm going to dive into it, and that's fantastic. And then the other book centering on this theme is one that I've had before. I've read it before, so I knew already that I liked it, and I don't have it now. I found a hardcover. It's All the Best, George Bush, and it's a collection of letters. It's a collection of his letters, not just the chatty letters that he wrote to his innumerable friends and supporters. If he was in office, for the long term of government service before he became president, and then even once he was in the Oval Office, if you wrote him a letter, you had a very good chance of getting a response. That doesn't happen now. You'd get something written by a functionary and signed with a machine. When he was in office, you had a good chance that he would write you a letter or dictate one and sign it himself and send it off to you. And that was if you were a total stranger. If you were a friend or a colleague, you got a nonstop stream of letters. And he also wrote, I don't even know how you describe them, quasi-formal letters, more formal letters, with an eye to their recipient, but with another eye cocked to history, to the president, to Ronald Reagan, assessing all the various things, places where he went, people that he met with. And I remember when I read the volume at first during the peak of my contempt for the man, and didn't give it its fair shake. And then I remember I read it decades later and was struck by the fact that he's a really good dramatist. Obviously murderously pressed for time, he still manages in those letters describing events, meetings with world leaders, that sort of thing, to set a stage, to include a couple of details, and he's really good with conveying personalities. And that's in dashed off letters. And I keep remembering the book. Whenever I get a book about him, like the one that we just saw the other day, When the World Seemed New, by Jeffrey Engel, which I haven't read yet, of course, because I just got it, but I can't wait to dig into it. And I'm sure that Engel has read this from cover to cover and studied it. It might not have any, historical revelations or insights, but my God, what a view of the man and the people that he knew. And the context is always honesty. You get the distinct impression, whether it's true or not, it might not be. I just can't imagine someone so busy having the presence of mind to systematically lie to his own journal and his own letters all the time in a way that's so consistent. But you get the impression when you're reading this that you're reading what he really thought of the things that he was looking at, the changes that were going on in the world, and the people that he was meeting. And so every time I get a book about him or see a reference, I always remember this book. I remember, you know, this is indexed. I could find that and find out what letters say about it, and then I always remember I don't have it. So when I found a hardcover, you know, at the Brattle sale lot, I grabbed it right up. And then the last one. The last one is that I'll show you. This is 6 for $6. I'll show you. This is a perfect example of the kind of gem that you will find at the Brattle sale cards that you might spend a whole lifetime looking for anywhere else. And I'm so happy to have it. It's Ruffles and Flourishes by Liz Carpenter. This is her White House memoir. If you've been watching this all 17,000 videos that I've made on this channel, you might have picked up on the fact that I really like White House memoirs. There's a long story behind why it's not particularly believable, so we might not ever get to it. I have a very distinct sweet tooth for Washington, D.C., and for the memoirs of the people who served in the White House. And so I have a huge number of them. And I had this once upon a time, and I didn't have it anymore until today. I was overjoyed. A smile beamed on my face when I found it for $1. She was the press secretary to President Johnson's wife. She was Lady Bird Johnson's press secretary. And that might not sound like much, but that's a nightmare. That's a cyclone of activity. And when she got out of office, when she left the White House, she wrote a memoir, and it's wonderful. It absolutely sparkles. And that was what I thought ages ago when I read it. I can't wait to reread it. But I want to give you a couple of tastes of what you'll never find in this book, but if you ever by some weird chance did, what you would find. She opens it by writing, and I want to make sure I get this all. I want to get everything. She opens it with her author's note. When Napoleon Bonaparte was sent into exile and sailed for the Isle of Elba, he asked aloud, "Whatever shall we do in that remote spot?" "Well, we shall write our memoirs. Work is the scythe of time." She writes, "I felt exactly like Napoleon on January 20th, 1969, when I went into exile in the upstairs study of my home in Washington. I donned my old blue bathrobe and fuzzy slippers and set out to relive the best years of my life, equipped with a manual typewriter of questionable ancestry and a massage chair." She writes about her editor, a wonderful woman named Maggie Cousins. She writes, "Who can resist an editor who writes, a few days after you start the book, quote, 'I hope your fingers are bleeding from beating the typewriter. I am braiding some new thongs into my whip. It has been a week Monday since you finished packing. Where is the manuscript?'" Then the next thing I want to read to you. She gives a cast of characters for her book, and she is the first character, and this is her description. Liz Carpenter, the heroine, beautiful, svelte press secretary to the First Lady, advice giver to presidents, tireless matchmaker, wife of one, mother of two. And it goes on from there. It goes on from there. It's a memoir of her being essentially at the eye of every storm of the White House. The Johnsons loved her, of course, and she conveys what Washington was like during that time. It was a very different time, less mercenary, more joyful, and yes, she starts off the book with the ecstasy and the agony. That's the name of the title. "I was sitting at my desk in the White House, minding everybody's business, and thoroughly enjoying it, when 3 sharp buzzes jolted me. A phone call from the 36th President of the United States. 'Liz, if you don't learn to keep your mouth shut,'" I could hear the rising fury of a nation in his voice, "'I'm going to ship you to the Johnson City Foundation.' "'Well, I don't want that to happen, Mr. President,' I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "'It's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.'" And the only other thing I want to show you here is the picture. There are great pictures in the book. She asked for Johnson's permission to reproduce some pictures that she had. This is our author. She asked for Johnson's permission to reproduce some pictures, and he gave her permission gladly, and he also sent her some pictures that she could use that she didn't have. One of them, just to give you a taste of the humor of the man, one of them is that. There she is. In the foreground are two enormous horses' patoots. But the picture I want to show you, we have the author photo of her smiling at her desk, but the thing that captures her job is another photo in here. There are, of course, pictures of him and her, Johnson's Beagles, but there's a picture that captures her job in a way that, well, her book captures it too, but well, wouldn't you know that when I'm on camera, I can't find the thing. Here, bear with me. It was an all-female staff for Lady Bird's staff, and it was just swamped with things to do, just swamped, and full of humor. She held press conferences all the time, and if it was nice outside, she held press conferences out on the steps, and just sat with the reporters, talking about Lady Bird, but also to talk about the administration. Unthinkable today. But so you've got her at the press conference, waving at the reporters. One of them asked how many raisins would be in the wedding cake of Linda Johnson, and that reporter was summarily given the task of counting. But the picture that captures her tenure in the White House best is this one here. Let me see if you can make it out. So this was a joy to find. It goes right in my collection of White House memoirs, and White House books. Actually, this counts as a White House memoir as well, and so in a way does this. So that was just a quick video. It didn't turn out to be quick. It was a video to show you the kinds of things, kinds of absolute treasures that you can find on a regular basis at the Brattle Bookshop. This is not rare. I could do this every week. And it wouldn't be the same stock that I'd looked at from the week before. So it's an enticement, if enticement is needed, for all of you to put on your traveling togs and come see me for SteveCon. I'll wrap it up here, but I'll be back soon. Thank you, BookTube.